Okay, so we are now recording. So hello everyone and welcome to this Baby Loss in the Workplace panel hosted by Compassionate Employers to mark Baby Loss Awareness Week. My name is Faith Holloway. I'll be your chair for today. And we are joined by an excellent panel who I'll ask to introduce themselves in just a moment. But firstly, some quick housekeeping. We do ask you to keep yourselves muted unless you are asking a question later on. We'll have time for that, or if you're obviously one of our panelists, just to avoid any distractions. It's really distracting to hear noise if you're not expecting it. However, there are plenty of ways to engage today, and we'd love for you to do that. So we have a chat where you can share your thoughts and any questions. I do have some pre-sent questions that some of you sent through, so thank you for sending those, and we'll try to get to those when we can. And you can also use the react function. There's a thumbs up, love heart, and applause. So if our panelists or anyone who's speaking does say something you agree with or you want to support, you can use that function as well. Obviously, as we've mentioned, we're recording today's session and we will be sending a copy to everyone who's registered. So if you can't stay with us for the whole session for whatever reason, please don't worry. And on that note, finally, today is a sensitive topic. If you have been affected by baby or pregnancy loss yourself, you're not alone. It's unfortunately much more common than we often think or talk about. It's estimated to affect 1 in 6 pregnancies in the UK. So we will be signposting to support throughout this session, but also please do check in with yourself and prioritise your own wellbeing. There are dedicated specialists and organisations who are available and want to help you, so do reach out for support if you need it during this session or afterwards or beyond today and Baby Loss Awareness Week. But without further ado, I'm going to ask our panel to introduce themselves. So I'm delighted to have Nick and Kara and Charlie joining us today. So if I can ask each of you to please share your name and your role, and also maybe tell those of the registrants and attendees today why you chose to join. Why did it feel important to you? So Kara, you're the first person on this side of the screen for me, so if you don't mind going first, and then I'll come to each of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Kara Davey. I'm a clinical psychologist and I specialise in people who've had difficult fertility journeys or who have lost a baby. I support both individuals through coaching and therapy, but also help inform organisations. An area of particular interest for me on the back of also having had a difficult fertility journey myself, including multiple early losses and a stillbirth for 3 weeks. So yeah, it's an area I'm really about. And yeah, and I suppose the reason I've started supporting more organisations and helping employers to better understand it and was interested in this panel discussion today is just because I've supported so many individuals who felt that their workplace didn't understand or didn't support them in the way that they would have liked. And I've seen lots of talented kind of employees leaving organisations for that reason. I thought it's a real shame that actually that's not what the individual or the organisation really want, and if we can increase understanding, then yeah, it can be beneficial for all.
Thank you so much, Kara, for sharing your personal story, but also, yeah, we would love to hear some of those insights that you've mentioned of people you've helped and what I'm sure everyone who's joined today is looking for, which is how we can be more compassionate employers and be more supportive of our colleagues. So thank you. Nick, can I come to you, please? Your name and your role and why you've joined us.
Yeah, hi everybody, thanks for joining. My name is Nick Speight. I am one of the people directors here at the Co-op. I probably don't need to describe the Co-op because most people know what we do. Convenience stores, we're the UK's largest funeral provider, legal services and insurance. I've been here for 8 years and my current role is Culture and Colleague Experience Director. So that means that I lead the strategic HR teams, anything from reward, well-being and benefits to leadership development, from early skills and apprenticeships to social mobility, inclusion and belonging. But everything that my team do is designed to improve the experience of our 57,000 Co-op colleagues across the UK. The reason I've joined the panel is that we've been working quite hard in recent years to make sure that we have progressive policies when our Co-op colleagues most need us in those moments that matter. And we also believe that by talking about them, we can encourage other organisations to do similar things. So thank you for inviting me to join Faith, and I'll hand over to Charlie.
Thanks, Nick, and yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining. So yeah, I guess I'm bringing a couple of perspectives as well today. So I work with Faith at Hospice UK, which is the organisation that hosts compassionate employers, and my role here is that I'm head of comms and campaigns. And as some of you probably know, we do a lot of work at Hospice UK with the wider hospice sector around encouraging a greater openness in society around death, dying and grief. We run a campaign called Dying Matters that works towards that, and we work with lots of partners and other organisations across the kind of healthcare system and the wider charity sector to, as I say, try and encourage a slightly more open, compassionate culture really around death, dying and grief. I'm also here with a personal perspective. My daughter was stillborn last year. She was called Rowan, and so I have, I guess, a quite recent or even current perspective of what it's like to be coming back to work and being in work, and what it's like to feel well supported, which I'm pleased to say I have been. And I suppose I bring a perspective too as a dad and as a man affected by this issue. So yeah, really pleased to be here and join the discussion.
Thank you, Charlie. Really excited to see where this conversation goes. I think yeah, with all of you being very generous, bringing your personal perspectives, but also a lot of really kind of tangible professional experience of leading this kind of support and organisation. So I guess to kick us off, we're here to mark Baby Loss Awareness Week. This week is meant to be around raising awareness of some of the challenges and some of the support needs of people who are affected by baby and pregnancy loss. So I guess my initial question to the three of you is, what are those common challenges if we're trying to raise awareness, if we want people to be aware of what people are facing when they experience a baby or pregnancy loss and then have to return to the workplace or be supported by the workplace? What are those things that those of us on the call can be aware of and be more sensitive and compassionate to? Kara, I know that you mentioned you work directly with a lot of workplaces, so I wonder if maybe you want to kick us off with some thoughts around what are those challenges or things that we should be compassionate towards.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first of all, for employees as they return to the workplace or as they're trying to kind of navigate working, one of the first things is sometimes lack of understanding from others. Understandably, if you've not experienced a loss yourself, it's really hard to understand exactly what that might feel like or what the challenges might be. Now, depending on the stage of loss, there might also be lots of the point that you're returning to work, there might still be investigations ongoing in terms of hospital investigations. There might still be a legal case if it was due to negligence. There might be anniversaries. There's lots of difficult dates and things that could still be approaching that people think the most difficult part has passed by the time you return to work, but actually there's potentially lots of those events still coming up. There's also just general workplace triggers. So within the workplace, there will be people who are pregnant, there will be people who are going on maternity leave, there will be people returning from maternity leave or potentially bringing in their baby for people to meet. There'll be people talking about their weekends and kind of family life for some people without a family who don't have that. So there's potentially a lot of triggers. There's also the awkwardness. So lots of people when they're returning to work will say that people are awkward around them. They don't know what to say, they don't know how to react towards them, they might avoid them, or they might potentially try to make something better because it's an awkward and kind of sensitive topic. They might try to say, oh well, at least you could get pregnant, or kind of comments that are sometimes well-intended but kind of dismissive. So I think some of the challenges for people, and also just on a practical level, the brain changes when you're trying to process grief and traumatic grief, which means that actually it's really hard. Like levels of exhaustion are high. It's really hard to function in the same way that you were. So trying to come back to a workplace and be productive and be the person you were when actually you don't feel like the person you are and your brain is literally working in a different way can be really, really difficult. So yeah, lots of challenges there for people.
Thank you, Kara. Yeah, I mean, I think that just illustrates the range of things that we need to be considerate of. There's kind of the really physical aspects, things that are happening in the office, things that maybe communications that are going out, which we will talk about a little bit later today. And yeah, physical changes in the body, physical, reactions to grief, lots there to consider. Charlie, I wonder if you have any kind of thing to add or anything that you agree with there from what's been shared in terms of that return.
I massively agree with everything that Kara said. It was a really good summary, and I think it's a really obvious thing to say, but I think it's important that someone in this situation is basically having a really rubbish time, and so being aware of that is the most important fundamental thing, isn't it? Like having an awareness of it and being cognizant of it in everything that you do and everything that whatever formal and informal interactions that you're having with that person. What really resonated from what Kara said was that it's a situation that plays out over a really long time. And exactly as Kara said, someone who's gone through this is very likely to be dealing with follow-ups with the hospital. I mean, I can't list the number of appointments that my wife and I have been to in the past year that in a very practical sense is huge amounts of time off work, even after that formal compassionate leave period had finished. So the flexibility that I've been given around that is really important. And I guess just as Kara said, when it comes to that slightly more cultural piece in a workplace, people do struggle. They struggle to know what to say. I firmly believe everyone's got really good intentions. No one wants to sort of set out to hurt anyone or say the wrong thing or hurt them by not saying anything. But one of the things that I've really learned, and this slightly draws on my professional experience, is that actually people have a bit of a mental barrier of knowing what to say or feeling anxious about saying something. And in my experience, professionally and personally, 99 times out of 100, once they say something, they find it a lot easier. The person on the receiving end of it finds it a lot easier. And actually, so once you're over that initial barrier, you sort of take a step forward that things then become a lot sort of softer to handle. So I'd encourage people as colleagues, regardless of their role, to really think about that and reflect on the fact that actually it's probably not as scary or as intimidating or anxiety inducing as they might think to just have the courage to kind of say something to a colleague that's going through that experience.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Charlie. And you mentioned a lot there, I think a lot around communication, which I'm hoping we have time to drill into a bit more. But I did want to pick up on something you said in the beginning, which was around the amount of time that this can sometimes take around going to medical appointments, needing time off to actually, not just the practical elements of it, but also actually grieve the loss that you've experienced and have time to be with family and be with your loved ones and take time for that outside of work. And I know for you, Nick, you created a pregnancy and baby loss policy at the Co-op, which you very generously, I think, shared publicly, and people have been able to use that as a bit of a template. But you also mentioned in your introduction that you have 57,000 employees. I know you have around 3,500 locations. As the Co-op, you're a massive organization. So what does that look like practically when you're trying to roll out bereavement leave, paid bereavement leave, which has a financial repercussion that we have to kind of address? What does that look like to roll that out in an organization as big as the Co-op, and what advice would you give to people on the call who are looking to introduce a policy or roll out a similar level of support?
Yeah, so I think that really the policy just sets the minimum standards. So the policy empowers line managers to be able to start the conversation, but really any policy can give a set number of days that people are entitled to take, whatever. But the most important thing is that the line manager feels empowered to be able to make a personal decision in each case, because every situation is different. So the most important question is always, what do you need? And there's no formula. So we set some minimum standards and we rolled that out across all our 3,500 sites. But we can't be there to help, to put our arm around the shoulder of a colleague or our arm around the shoulder of the manager who's having that conversation with the colleague. So we provide as much support as we can. So access to resources for the line manager, but also resources to support the colleague, but also a support line for our colleagues and a support line for our line managers, because I think the biggest key to this working is the confidence of the line manager to have that conversation, and the confidence of the colleague to be able to talk to the line manager and to ask for the time that they need, or the adjustments to their working time or their shift patterns or whatever they need at that time. It's the confidence to be able to ask. So the policy sets minimum standards, and then it's about the conversation and keep on communicating it and upskill your line managers as much as you possibly can, which is no easy feat when you've got thousands of line managers spread from the north of Scotland to the south of England and in Northern Ireland. That's the hardest part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really excellent point, I think, Nick, because oftentimes when we talk about policies, I find that we're talking about the impact for employees, but I think what we often hear, at least anecdotally at Compassionate Employers, is that it's often not the employee who's reading that policy, because their manager wants to kind of protect them from having to go through and read any additional documents or that kind of admin that comes with that. So very often it's the line manager who uses that policy to decide what to do. So that flexibility and that empowerment, I think you said, of those line managers is really important. And it also brings me nicely into a stat that I found, which we've just posted on our LinkedIn at Compassionate Employees yesterday, which I thought was so interesting around the importance of line managers. There was a report from the CIPD, which is around workplace support for pregnancy and baby loss in 2022. And they found that 53% of employees had spoken to their line manager about experiencing a baby or pregnancy loss, but only 6% had spoken to a member of the HR team. And I think oftentimes we think this is a HR issue and it sits with HR in terms of writing policies or delivering support. But those stats and what we hear from employees directly is that often it's the line manager who's that first person of support. And if we don't support them, exactly as you're saying, Nick, how can they have those conversations? How can they feel confident? And they're the representation of your organization. So I wonder if there's any thoughts from you, Kara, or from Charlie or Nick as well, please jump in around line management. You say it's difficult, with the amount of line managers that you have, but what does that look like? When we say, we often throw out these words like empowering line managers or supporting line managers. Practically, what does that look like when we're upskilling them? Kara? Yeah, thank you.
So I think, first of all, the obvious one is, as you talked about, upskilling is providing training. So that could be specialist training in terms of baby loss itself and how to support people. But I also recognise the reality that line managers are dealing with lots of difficult situations all of the time. And sometimes a more general kind of training for everyone, just in terms of how to deal with, how to have difficult conversations, how to break, kind of have a sensitivity around the topic. It's really hard to truly empathize with every type of loss. There are so many different types of losses. They all have unique challenges, and great, a manager could go away and find out more about that. But if they don't know about that specific loss, it's okay to say, I don't understand exactly the impacts of that. Help me. Do you know what you need here? Or some people will, some people won't. It's not putting the onus on the individual, but asking them if they know. And I think training to help someone just to have those difficult conversations is really helpful, just as that first kind of step. I think the other thing is being able to, I want to bust a myth a little bit. So I hear so often from individuals that managers have tried really hard to protect them and say, do not contact this person, give them space because they've just had this awful loss. And actually, for most individuals I speak to, they don't know that someone has said that, and their colleagues who they know for years and years and years suddenly just ignore them at the worst time in their lives. And I think that is something that again and again comes up, like, why did nobody reach out? Why did no one ask if I was okay? Or why were colleagues so quiet? So I would say, things like, don't just assume someone needs space, maybe just have one initial reach out to the person, acknowledge their loss and say, how would you like us to deal with communication going forward? Do you want us to touch base? Do you want the team to be aware? What do you want them to be aware of? And sometimes reaching out with a kind of a box of you know, for food vouchers because they might not feel like cooking at that time, or some kind of gesture that says, you know, we are thinking of you and we're wanting to make life a little bit easier for you. I think those things are really important that line managers can be aware of. As you say, reading the policies and breaking down so that people don't need to go. You know, some people will use sick leave, for example, and actually they don't need to use sick leave because there is a policy. So people being aware of, you know, what is available to them and their rights, because they're often navigating a lot of admin anyway in terms of their loss and what that involves. So helping them with that would be good. Line managers can request or bring in experts sometimes can be helpful. So I've worked with individuals who've said that a line manager has asked for the team to have a webinar so the team understand loss a bit more and how colleagues might respond. And those kind of things create real loyal employees, like they're not forgotten by employers at all if you know, if managers or organizations go that kind of extra mile. And I know you said we're going to talk about communication. I think the biggest thing is communication and sensing when you speak about it, using someone's language. So if they're talking about their baby and using their baby's name, then you follow their lead and use the baby's name. Or, you know, being sensitive to how someone is speaking to you and the language they're using and reflecting that back can be really helpful. And it's okay to say, I don't know what to say in this situation, but, you know, please do, you know, please tell me what you want and need. Or, you know, acknowledging that it might be awkward for them returning to work, acknowledging that I know there might be other difficult dates, I might not know them, but let me know if you want to take leave during those dates, or there are days where you need to take compassionate leave. Or so I think the biggest thing is empowering someone to be able to tell you what they need, because you can't have all the answers, but you can create a really safe space for them to know, you know, where to then, and then it's not the line manager's job to kind of do everything from there, but they can signpost on to other organizations or specialists or health insurance that might provide support, or HR, or and the other thing is, if you've got fertility champions or baby loss champions within the organization, so people within the organization who've gone through the experience themselves and are happy to be a kind of first port of call for people, that kind of internal support can be really helpful. So signposting onto them can be really good if you have that within the organization.
Yeah, amazing. Lots there for, I can see people taking notes and writing things down, lots there for managers. I think the main takeaway for me from what you've just said, Kara, is I think we often talk about empowering managers, but we also, at least I notice at Compassionate Employers, we often take away a lot of autonomy from people who are bereaved, not just by baby loss, but other forms of loss. And it, like you say, seems to be protecting them, but actually we're taking away choice from them at a time that they've already had something happen to them that they had no control over. So actually, how helpful is that kind of psychologically, but also practically, to take away even more choices from them? So I think what you're saying is be honest, be clear with that communication, keep having the communication, but also don't make choices for people about how their colleagues will support them, or what people will be able to share with them. And we're talking about communication, and I want to obviously get to that point because I think it's a big part of it. And Charlie, obviously you have personal experiences you shared, but you are a communications professional. You head up our communication and campaigns team, and you talk about death and dying matters campaigns that we run at Hospice UK. So what other thoughts do you have there, I guess, that you can share with people around what to say, what not to say? Were there things that surprised you, or, you know, things that people should be aware of in terms of compassionate communication?
Yeah, thanks, Faith. I think there's probably a couple of things that I'd say, which is, yeah, Kara used the phrase "bust a myth," and I'm gonna try and bust one too, which is that I've already said it in my previous point, but I don't think it's as hard as people think to talk to and support someone that's gone through any sort of loss, and baby loss is no different. I think people can feel very intimidated by it, and I think the more that we can break that myth down, break that perception down, the better. My experience, I can only speak for my personal experience, and everyone's a bit different, right? But no one has said anything to me in the workplace that has made me upset, right? When I can see that they've made an effort to say something to me, that might be as simple as, I heard what happened, I'm really sorry. And that's it. Then I never have to say anything again if it's a colleague that I don't work with that much. Or people have sent me little messages on Teams. We work quite remotely, so that, you know, that's often the way that stuff happens, you know. So if it can be really that simple, you know. I know that people who've experienced baby loss feel a lot that they want a sense of almost validation that the loss is a real one, you know. And as Kara said, you know, there's a lot of different dynamics around the stage of the loss and whatnot. But I think that there's a real truth that people feel good when they have a bit of that sense of validation. And actually giving someone that sense of validation is really as simple as saying, I heard what happened, and I just want to say I'm really sorry. And you know, I don't think that's as hard as people think it is. And what we definitely see through Dying Matters and through Compassionate Employers all the time is that when people do that, they almost feel this great sense of relief, and this huge burden leaves them. That is like, oh God, that really wasn't as hard as I thought. Like, and they can see the difference that it's made to the person that they've spoken to. Because I always go out of my way to, not because I feel I have to, just because I want to. I always profusely thank people who say something to me, because it makes me feel good, to be honest. And I say I'm so grateful. I'm really glad that I'm really pleased that you'd mentioned that. So that'd be the first thing. And then the second thing, just to also pick up something that Kara said, is that when it comes to communication, is really be led by the person, and create them a little bit of space to tell you what they want, you know. And I think a very underrated question, as we've said, is, you know, what do you need? What do you want? How can I help you? You know, do you want me to talk about this or not? You know, do you want me to use your child's name, or would you prefer me not to? You know, and again, just having the courage to ask that question and letting the individual lead you is again a really simple but a massively sort of effective step.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. I think you're right. I think a lot of times in these conversations we talk about how difficult they are, how scary they can be, and I wonder how helpful that is for us in the grief space, or those of us who work directly in bereavement, to talk about things in that way, because it kind of perpetuates that idea that it is difficult, and that kind of mental barrier that you've talked about earlier. But yeah, I mean, I've experienced it personally. I've experienced it talking to people who have supported colleagues, that as soon as you get over that initial conversation, and it can be as simple as, I heard what happened, I'm really sorry this has happened to you, or like Kara had said, I don't know what to say, but I want to say something because I don't want to let you think that I don't care. That can be the start of a conversation. It can be sufficient to have that conversation if you're not particularly kind of working that closely. Yeah, I think that's a real kind of key takeaway, I think, for today, for anyone listening, is if you're worried about that conversation, you will very likely feel that relief that Charlie's mentioned. And also it doesn't need to be scary, and the more we have it, the less people will feel that way. So that was really helpful. Thanks for diving into the communication side of things. I'm wondering if we can go back a little bit, maybe to the more practical support that we've talked about with you, Nick, around, it seems like there's a big piece here around returning to work. We started the conversation about some of the potential triggers in the workplace. I'm wondering if you can, we've talked about the great policy that the Co-op has introduced. I wonder if you can do a bit of a deep dive into some of those other supports, because I know you have a very holistic support offer. You mentioned some of those other things. What are the other practical things that you offer, maybe when someone comes back to work, or they're looking for support outside of paid bereavement leave? What's the Co-op doing that maybe other people might want to implement?
Yeah, so we have access to counselling support for any colleague that needs it. We signpost colleagues to organisations like Petal, Tommy's, ARC, Abortion Talk. You know, we've got access on our colleague hub that our colleagues can easily get to. I think the most important thing is that kind of open question around how are you and what do you need, and quite often it might be something as simple as changing a start time because a colleague's not sleeping, and therefore, you know, an early start might not be appropriate. So it might be temporary changes to working patterns. It might be making sure that a colleague has easy access to the WC You know, there's some really practical things that line managers can do to support an individual in whatever the individual circumstance they're facing. Our basic is that we offer up to 10 days absence for anyone who's lost a baby, up to 24 weeks, but our line managers are empowered to give more if that's what's needed at the time. And there's no set formula. It doesn't have to be 10 consecutive days. It could be some days immediately and then some days later. There's no set formula. The whole thing with this is setting a basic minimum, but then empowering the manager to do whatever is needed in the circumstances and be human. Because I fully believe that in terms of engagement, in terms of how a colleague feels about the place that they work and the team that they work with and the manager that they work for, when you really need help and when you really need support, if you get it, that's better than anything we can do in terms of a bonus or an offer or a discount or anything. You know, how people are treated when they really need support is the biggest engagement driver that I can think of in the co-op today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe it would be worth talking about that a little more, Nick, around, you know, what does it mean for you to be a compassionate employer? So the co-op has recently come on board in the Compassionate Employers program and is going through that process with us. Why is that important, and what difference have you seen that make? The fact that you offer a very generous, I think I have to say, you know, bereavement leave offer for people who are experiencing pregnancy and baby loss. We know some organisations don't have a policy, they don't offer any bereavement leave, they don't have any training for their managers. So for those who are maybe wondering, you know, we're delving into this process of becoming a compassionate employer or thinking about our baby loss support, and they're wondering what that will do for them as a business, for them as their culture, to keep colleagues feeling more connected to each other, like you're saying. What have you noticed in terms of, since you've implemented that, what difference has that made at the co-op?
Yeah, so I mean, the reason we think it's very important is that we've all been through situations where we've needed support. We're all human beings, but you know, with a cooperative, we're the UK's largest funeral provider. You know, we're not at the behest of shareholders. We're a member-owned organisation, so we can do things a little bit differently. And we look at moments that matter. So we've got 75 policies, and we can't possibly look at all 75 and be industry leading or unique in all 75. So what we've looked for is those policies where we can make a difference to our colleagues. And we asked our colleagues what's important to them. And it was our colleagues that told us that our compassionate leave policy, our fertility policy, our pregnancy loss policy were important areas to look at. And we asked them what was getting in the way, and they told us. So that's what's driven us to actually select these policies that we're looking at. So not every co-op policy is going to be different from everybody else's, but we've selected about 5 that we really want to make a difference with. And you know, we talk about what it means to work at the co-op. What experience do we want our colleagues to have? What's our colleague brand? And we think along the way, in a day-to-day journey with the co-op, there'll be things that support the colleague experience and the colleague brand, and there'll be things that are working against it. And what we're looking to do is to look for those moments that matter, that might work against what we want it to feel like working here at the co-op, to try and do something about it. And that's why we specifically picked the pregnancy loss policy.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, I think that's great advice for anyone who's listening, because like you say, I'm sure there's other organisations on the call that have well into 50, 60, 70 policies, like you've mentioned, especially if they're large organisations like yourselves. So how do you decide where to focus your attention and where to kind of dedicate that support? But being led by the employees themselves, those moments that matter, like you say, I think is a really good, strong piece of advice for prioritisation. I'm just conscious that I've been sharing all of my questions for the panel, but if you do have questions that you would like to ask them, or any that you would like me to relay, please do feel free to use the chat to share those. I'm wondering if we can go back to the adjustments piece, because I think there were some really interesting ones there that the Co-op are doing. I'm wondering if for you, Kara or Charlie, is there any other adjustments or things that you felt or you've seen other organisations do that have been particularly impactful or maybe quite innovative in terms of outside of the box support? Or is there anything we haven't already mentioned that you feel is an important adjustment for workplaces to be making?
I'll just add, I suppose, that I've had quite a few organisations bring me in to do transition coaching with people, and just 1 or 2 sessions. I'd like to say that the smoother you make that transition, excuse me, the smoother you make a transition for someone returning to work, generally the easier it's going to feel for them to get back, the quicker they'll get back to kind of productivity, whatever that looks like. It's obviously kind of more limited after a loss, but generally if you make that transition easier for people, you're going to find that their well-being is better, their productivity is better. And so yeah, often organizations will bring me in for 1 or 2 sessions of actually, can somebody get some specialized support from somebody who understands the area, helps them to think through practical things that would make this transition smoother, helps them think about how to have those conversations with managers or with team members. You know, I might provide a template email that people can send in advance to reduce some of that awkwardness we were talking about with conversations back to the workplace. And just that small 1 or 2 sessions can make such a huge difference for people in terms of feeling supported. And the other thing, I know you spoke about kind of counselling earlier and being provided. I would say that a lot of people who experience a loss, it's a traumatic loss, and therefore some specific trauma therapy can be so much more helpful in terms of reducing the emotional impact on someone than purely counselling. So I think encouraging or letting people know where they can access kind of more specialist support, and that could be through kind of organisations like I do, but it also could be through health providers. So now, you know, a lot of the big insurance companies that I'm registered with, as soon as they have somebody who's had a loss, they will say to me, okay, this person's experienced a loss, we would like, you know, would you like to offer them more specialist support? So I think letting employers know that that exists out there, that actually they don't have to just go for generic counselling, but they might want something much more specific around their loss or their circumstances, or they might want trauma therapy, because if there are trauma symptoms, they will not be reduced by counselling. The only thing that helps reduce trauma symptoms, if the brain hasn't processed a traumatic loss, is to have one of the evidence-based trauma therapies. And I think that's really, really important. And I think organisations can raise that awareness to make sure people are getting the right support. And, you know, just to echo what you were saying there, Nick, that the biggest thing I hear is people saying, you know, my organisation talk about we care about well-being, but the point I needed it, they weren't necessarily there, or they didn't care. So it's absolutely those things, that those little moments where you bring someone in for a webinar so the team understand, or you provide that coaching, or you, you know, that you go that extra mile. Those are the things that make such a big difference, and generally stop someone going back off, because sometimes people will return too quickly, the adjustments haven't been made, and they go off kind of sick later, or and that becomes much harder, I think, for the organisation and the individual. So yeah, really focusing on my two kind of main points I want to drive home are: 1, help with that transition, and 2, the point we were making earlier about connection is the one thing you can really do for someone after a loss, and therefore try not to avoid, or, you know, kind of avoid those conversations or stay away. I think those are the 2 things that employers can do to make a real difference.
Great, thank you so much, Kara. Did you want to add something, Charlie?
Yeah, I think the thing that I see the best employers doing, and Nick's already described it at Co-op, is thinking really carefully about how their different policies link together. There's something and sort of overlap, right? You know, no one's experience can be sort of delineated into a set of policies, and so you've got to think about how you apply that holistic set of policies for a real person. And there's something specific, isn't there, about baby loss in it, as distinct from grief, that would a loss that would imply compassionate leave in a regular sense, for want of a better word, which is that baby loss implies something about the future, in the sense that obviously every couple is different and you can't speak in absolute terms, but there is likely at least to be the sense, the reality that, you know, that couple are going to want to look at what their next pregnancy and trying again, and so that's where a policy that starts out around baby loss and compassionate leave needs to fluidly, seamlessly sort of move into a policy around pregnancy support and ultimately policies around parental leave. And there might be other policies there along the way too, depending on someone's different experience. And so I think the employers that get it right are the ones that can think very holistically about that group of policies together and be really cognizant of where and how they can helpfully and should helpfully overlap with each other.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Charlie. Okay, I'm conscious of time. We're coming towards the end of the session, and unless we have any specific questions from those of you who are listening in, I think I'll have one final question for you, Charlie, just around internal communications, and then I'll come to each of the three of you just to get your final kind of one practical thing that you'd love people to go away and do, or one kind of final thought that you hope everyone takes away for today. But Charlie, I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit around your professional expertise again, which is, you know, we're in Baby Loss Awareness Week. There'll be lots of organisations who are talking about this internally, finding ways to kind of communicate it. And I'm just thinking back to what Kara said at the beginning around some of those potential triggers of, you know, hearing about announcements of other people's pregnancies or baby showers or other things that may be difficult to kind of hear at those times. So do you have any tips around, given that you talk about death and dying at Hospice UK a lot internally, but also externally, how can organisations talk about that in a sensitive way, I guess? Like, how would you, what advice would you give to people talking about Baby Loss Awareness Week this week, and how to do that in a compassionate and sensitive way?
It's a good question, and it's quite a big question, and I think you can't, you know, go back to what Kara said initially about, you know, the difficult things that are going to be thrown up. You know, it's impossible for an organisation to sort of completely legislate for that and completely take away what can be just difficult things that happen. But I think as it relates to communication, organisational communication, be that internal or external, in weeks like Baby Loss Awareness Week, like the thing that I feel really strongly as a communications professional is that you should communicate how you, as best as you can as an organization, communicate how you would talk as a person. Like I was at a hospice the other week who said they try and all of what their organization says, be it on it's a children's hospice that works with baby loss a lot, and all of what they say as an organization on their website or internally to their staff, they run it as a sense check. How would one of our nurses or healthcare assistants deliver this message as a person to a person, you know? And you've said it as well before, Faith, in conversations that we've had, is that, you know, if you're writing a policy, read it out and imagine saying it to the person that's effectively on the receiving end of that policy. So a funny thing can happen, I think, in organizational communications, specifically about difficult issues, is that it gets elevated into this slightly overly formal and sometimes slightly sort of almost slightly stuffy language. And I think the more that can get broken down and organizations learn to communicate just as they would if they were literally talking like I am now to other people face to face, the better.
Absolutely. I'm glad we're on the same page about that, because yeah, something I feel very passionate about, that we should talk to people like people, and not kind of put on this strange, quite kind of clinical professional hat just because something makes us uncomfortable or is maybe talked about less often in the workplace. So I think we're going to end a little bit early, which I hope nobody minds. I'm sure nobody does. But before we do, please do share some love and some thoughts and your thoughts about today in the chat for our panelists so they can see it. But I'll come to each of you just to get some final wrap up and thoughts, maybe a practical thing or one thing that you hope people take away from today. So Kara, I'll come to you first.
Thank you. Okay, so I think I kind of mentioned them. I think my two are help people with that transition, make it as smooth as possible. And as we've spoken about, that being human, just connect with people or offer them the opportunity to connect, reach out, or check if they're okay. That just empathy is, empathize with them to a certain extent of, I'm so sorry, and I know this is difficult, and what do you want and need? And I guess one practical thing in terms of kind of pregnancy announcements within the workplace and things like that, sometimes a lot of people I speak to say that they just like to know that something is happening in advance, if people are aware of it, like privately via text, because it gives them time. You can't avoid it, these things happen, but it gives them time to privately process that, rather than them being hit by a trigger in a kind of public place, or and actually that being really emotive for them. So just giving people a little bit of a heads up in advance. These things happen, often it happens with colleagues who are pregnant. They're very mindful of somebody else who've had a loss, and they're like, I don't know what to say or what to do. And when they kind of have that private conversation, it can really help. So again, that comes back to human and being connection, but it's a practical point. If people are thinking, I don't know how to deal with this, just letting people know and giving them the choice whether to be around or not when an event is happening where it might kind of celebrate something that's sensitive.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kara. Nick, what would your final thoughts be, or something you wish that people take away from listening today?
I think I've heard people say with progressive policies in the moments that matter that some people might take advantage. The reality is they don't. And even if they do, you can't write your policies and set your rules based on the 1% that might. And other people might say it's too expensive, we can't afford it. The reality is it's not expensive, because if you think about the cost of absence, the cost of lost productivity, the cost of turnover when colleagues that you've let down leave you, it's not expensive. And then my final thought is that the anticipation of the conversation is nearly always much worse than the actual reality of the conversation.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick. And Charlie, what would your final thoughts or takeaways be?
Yeah, very, very much agree with what's been said, and I'd echo again the point around these conversations are often not as bad as what is feared. And I think I'd probably say both organisationally and individually, be courageous, be brave. I think have the bravery to have a conversation with someone, and as Nick has just said, it probably won't turn out as bad as you think. And then organisationally, what Nick and the team have done at Coop is brave, right? They turned around and said to their tens of thousands of employees, tell us which policies you want us to look at again. I'm sure that threw up lots of really complicated challenges, but that's a brave thing to do, isn't it? It's having the courage to, courage of conviction, isn't it? Really, in saying we want to be a great place to work, so we're going to put our money where our mouth is. So I think both, as I say, both organisationally and individually, there's something there about having bravery and having courage.
Well, thank you, the three of you, so much, and thank you to everyone, excuse me, who's joined us, and those of you who will be watching this back, I'm sure in future, who weren't able to join us today. A huge thank you for being here this morning with us, and I can see from the chat there's a flurry of messages saying, it's been brave, it's been informative, it's been clear, it's been helpful. So again, a huge thank you to you, Kara, Nick and Charlie, for sharing that expertise with us. We're going to put up a slide now that has a support information, importantly, around signposting. So again, if you are finding that you are impacted by today, if you want to reach out for support, please do. It's there and people are ready and available to help. And also there should be a QR code to join our LinkedIn community. We're going to be continuing this conversation on our Compassionate Employers LinkedIn page, and we'd love to see you there and hear your thoughts there as well. So do look after yourselves, take care for the rest of the week, and yeah, do engage with us at Compassionate Employers. We'd love to see you join our newsletter, come join us on LinkedIn. We run these free webinars on a regular basis to raise awareness and yeah, continue this conversation around being a compassionate employer. So do come join us. We'd love to have you there. And thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.